Hi, this is Alan Eisenberg, and welcome to another episode of Healthy You. I'm really excited about the show today. My guest is Danielle Matthew, and she's a licensed marriage and family therapist who has over 20 years' experience working with children and adolescents. Danielle is the author of the book, The Empowered Child: How to Help Your Child Cope, Communicate, and Conquer Bullying, which just released October 2017, and I just had the great pleasure of reading this weekend. She founded the Empowerment Space in Los Angeles area to support bully victims and their families, aid schools and health and wellness professionals, and educate others about the bullying epidemic. And as we all know, this is what my passion is too. So welcome, Danielle.
Thank you, Alan, for having me today.
So just so you know, to my audience, Danielle speaks to parents whose children are victims of bullying, educators who seek to prevent bullying in school, and other clinicians who want a dialogue about how to support families through bullying situations. And Danielle, as I said, I just read your book, and wow, great work. You
Thank
share
you.
you share your own story in it of being bullied in the fourth grade, and as my listeners know, I talk about my stories a lot and the long term effects it had, and you do too, and that's what I immediately I was like, wow, wow, she's not just writing a book about bullying, but she's sharing insights. So why do you think it is so important that we share our stories as adults? Why what was that thing that said to you, I'm going to share now?
I felt for me, the reasons that I had to do this were because of credibility. As a parent reading a book about bullying, how much incredible credibility is it when that person really gets your story as the parent who has a child who's bullied, because I was bullied. So they understand that I really get them. I understand them. I understand their journey and I know how it feels. I get it. So I wanted to put my audience right there with me in everything I was saying. I felt it would have so much more worth if they knew my personal journey and struggles as well.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what, that's why I thought, when I read it, I was like, oh, this is going to be
Mhm.
such a good conversation because I think you get what I get, which is to have empathy, to be able to really believe in the help that we're offering, that you're offering, that I offer. You have to go through things. I mean, and we know that
Yeah.
most people have gone through bullying. That's not like some mystery, but most of us adults just don't share it. Like I'm sure you hear all the time when you're working with, that the parents never said anything more than, oh well, it's kids being kids, or you should just punch them back,
Yes.
or all these things they didn't necessarily do either. It's like that. That's the part that that I kind of think about is like, at what point are you? Do you think a parent should be saying, me too?
Right.
You're not just telling me you got bullied. Let me tell you it happened to me, and it happens to all of us because I feel like that's when children feel alone. That's when I felt alone was when my mom looked at me and said, "When are you going to get over this?"
Right. I do agree with you. There is a point where you have to think about, well, what was my own personal experience? And I do talk about that in the book, where how parents can use their own personal experience to share with their kids. And that really can bring them closer and validate them. And then I have the other parents who could be very angry when their children are bullied and they want them to hit them back. They want them to defend themselves and physically if needed. And what I tend to do to help parents is I say, okay, then what? So if you have them hit them back, or if you go talk to the coach, let's say on the baseball team, then what happens? And they'll say, well, what do you mean what happens? And I said, well, let's go through the scenario of if you go talk to the coach and then the coach talks to the bully, or you talk to the parent of the bully, what happens? Well, it will stop. That's just what we have to do. And I said, well, let's go through the scenario. And as soon as I take them through a little bit, it's like a light clicks off in their head. Oh, you're right. There's re-victimization that can
Mm-hmm.
happen to my
Mm-hmm.
child because I took care of the problem for them and I didn't let them try to handle it themselves. And now they're going to do it even worse to my kid. And it's the light going off that's that Me Too moment of, wow, I get it. I really understand it and how that can affect my kid.
Yeah, and how that also leads to me, it leads to the child no longer trusting the parent, no longer talking to
Yeah,
them, which is
yeah,
what I say is, a critical problem is when you're, as a parent, you think, well, I need to go to the school and do something. Well, if you don't know how that school handles bullying, if you don't know if,
mm-hmm.
because I know as kids, we don't want to be rats. We don't want to be,
Yes, that's
we
right.
know what the repercussions are of being the snitch or the whatever. We don't want that. We want solutions and we want help and
Yeah, and support.
right. And that's where I think you see that. And then how about displaced aggression? One of the things that I think we see happen and parents could really pay good attention to is, are they seeing displaced aggression in their child, which to me is this idea that they come home and they're angry all the time and
Yeah.
their grades are dropping and they don't want to go to school and
Hmm.
all these signs that no one's looking at. But the big one to me being sort of this displaced aggression, which I think almost all children who are victims of bullying, they come home and they're angry, and they can
They
take it
do.
out on their parents because they
That's right.
trust their
That's
family
right.
won't hurt them.
That's right. There's a safety with the parent and or safety with the sibling even who might be younger or not strong. And so they feel like that is a way to get out their release of emotions. And that's why when I wrote my book, I really came up with a roadmap of how parents can help monitor that better by coming up with the 3 E's of empathy, empowerment, and engagement, really talking to their kids when they're at a better emotional place themselves. So that's what I mean is a parent isn't just coming home after a very stressful day of work where the boss yelled at them or something happened. They're in a more contained place themselves of calm when they go to their child to talk about the behaviors they're seeing. I'm wondering if you're feeling this way, but you don't tell the kids how they feel. A lot of times what I am seeing is parents will just use the words for how they think their child feels, and it's so empowering to let them tell you their story, not for you to tell them, and let them come back to you with the words. And once you have an idea of how they feel, then you can empower them to say, well, how do you want to handle your feelings? If instead of taking it out on us at home or your brother or your sister, because we see you're really angry, let's talk about a plan of action. What
Mm.
can we do to help you, empower you? Do we want to role play certain scenarios that happen to you at school so we can come up with a solution? And then there's the engagement, which is the follow up to that plan. I'm standing by you as your parent. I'm not going to let that go. I'm going to be here to support you as long as you need me, and I'm going to be consistent in my check in. And I think that's a way to gain the collaborative relationship between the child, adolescent, and parents, really.
Yeah, and I think you, if I remember, it's in your book. But I talk a lot about listening to understand instead of listening to reply,
Yeah,
and
that's
that's
right.
that's a
That's right.
skill. That's a skill you have to learn. That's not
Mhm.
natural for us because most of us, like what we're doing, we're having a conversation. So you
Right.
say something and I reply to it, and that's what we're kind of taught to do, or how to have conversation. But truly listening to understand is to listen
That's
and
right.
not do have like a canned reply, but try to tell your child you heard what they said, which in many cases I think is almost repeating back to them. So what I hear is the problem is this, and so what do you want to do about it? Does that
That's
does that
right.
work with kids? Does that kind of
It
logic?
does. It does. It does. It's like a reflective listening skill, right? You
Mm-hmm.
are reflecting back what you're hearing them say. And I think it's very empowering for kids because it gives them a sense of being listened to by someone and being seen and being heard. Because when they're getting bullied, they're not feeling like they're being seen or heard. And this gives that option to kids to be able to feel that. And it can be such a corrective, as we would call an experience, to have that. That empathy, that reflecting skill to do that. Very
Mm-hmm.
empowering.
And I think that empathy I always tell people, I said we're taught to be sympathetic, not empathetic. And I'm going to go out
Yeah.
on a limb and guess that you saw the Brene Brown piece on sympathy and empathy and the difference, maybe. But Sympathy is much different than empathy.
Yes,
Much,
yes, and I
much
know.
different.
Right.
Yeah.
I
And
agree.
and when you're giving a sympathy response, which is, oh, let me make it better, like you have a boo boo, like you got hurt, right?
Yes.
That's not what we're talking about. It's
No,
not
no, 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 no,
there.
no, no.
Nobody's going to be able. You can't go to school with your kid all day. You can't.
No.
And you
Can't
even
pretend.
mentioned the idea of the boss yelling at you at work. Workplace bullying is real
Yeah.
too.
Yes.
And what happens is little bullies grow up to be big bullies if things don't change, and little victims grow up to be big victims, and we don't even realize it. But that it happens at work all the time too. So I don't know
Yes.
what other signs would you say like are pretty obvious or that parents don't recognize that the child is being bullied, that a child's being bullied.
I think social isolation is a huge one,
Hmm.
particularly in adolescence, because if you had all these kids that used to come over to the house regularly and they're no longer coming over, your child's isolating in their room, wants the door closed, the light off, avoiding coming out and eating dinner. You're seeing a loss in their appetite as part of the depression. And they're making excuses for not wanting to go to school now and
Hmm.
saying that they don't want to go and they used to really love school. And of course, the one I see the most, Alan, is the decline in grades. There
Hmm.
really is a direct correlation between the bullying at school and a decline in grades, especially if they used to be a really good student and you're now seeing a drop in their grades. That really is a huge sign that potentially your child is bullied. And the way I look at signs is a pattern of behavior. So if they see something one time, it's not to say you don't want to check in with your child, but it doesn't mean that there's necessarily a bullying situation. This is a pattern over time of a change in a behavior, a decline in a grade, of social isolation that we're seeing. And any maybe physical bruises, if they come home with any and they say the locker hit them in their face, again, it would be a pattern of seeing these types of signs.
Right. And it's funny. I talk about like it'll never happen because teachers don't have time, but of doing emotional. If you did emotional attendance like you took physical attendance,
Ah,
these things
yeah.
would be so obvious, wouldn't they? It's
Yeah.
like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, Johnny's quiet today. He's usually talkative, and his grades. He got an F on this. He usually gets. If you actually took the time to take an emotional attendance of the child, you would start to see these common patterns. And the problem is, you're right. Like even for me, when I was going through it, my grades were they were I would I don't want to sit here and tell you I'm bright. Well, I think I'm bright. Um, but my grades started to falter, and the thing was, if I hadn't moved, I often wonder, would I have gotten to college? Would I have gotten a job and been able to do what I do and do all that? Because I felt like I just didn't want to be at school, and that's the
Yeah,
key. We know
that's right.
60,000 kids every day in America stay home from school, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
of bullying. We know this, and what is that? That whole thing. It's a slippery slope. Once you start down it,
Mm-hmm.
where does it go? And it's a slippery slope for the bully because we know that bullies, are much more likely to get a criminal record, which of course ruins their lives as well. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm always like, everything's there. How do we see it? How do we deal with like what kind of tips do you have for a parent who thinks their child is being bullied? Like, what kind of things should a parent really do other than we talked about a couple things, but what are some of the biggies?
Well, one of the things that I think is really important is to use the three E's as the roadmap to address the bullying. And so that would be asking them questions. I'm wondering if you're feeling this way. Coming up with the solution, empowering them for the solution, and follow through. And that might encompass bringing the school in as well. And what I say when parents ask me this, well, how do I get my school involved if I think the bullying's going on with someone at the school? We really talk about asking to see a policy on bullying in the school, because that will tell you the culture of that school. Every school is different. I kid you not. Some schools have certain policies and have a prevention program in the school that they work with for an entire year. Some may have one presentation every now and then. But you want to find out how the school addresses bullying. I think that's a really important piece, particularly if the bully is going to the same school as the victim. And you want to ask yourselves, what do they do? How do they handle it? And that policy can show that to you really well. And you want to get really into role playing with your kid about situations that come up when you know as a parent your child is being bullied. How can I help my child? Do you want to role play situations that really are happening to you? Does that seem like something that would be helpful? And showing that you're there by their side. And sometimes they're going to push you away and say, I've got it handled. I don't need your help. I'm old enough. And you know what you say back is, I get it, but you know what? I'm going to still stand by you here, and I'm not going to let this go because I'm worrying about you and I care about you, and we're going to figure out a way to get through this. Parents can become powerful after becoming powerless. And I do feel the 3 E's is a roadmap to helping to get there for families.
Yep. I think I agree. And as I read your book, it just was great. And the other thing that, I like to mention is, not only the school policy, but is there a really good program with the school psychologists, with the school counselors who are they educated enough to be able to be that empathetic person? Because, as I told you, I think before the show, I had a problem with that. And then, the movie Bully showed like that the administration didn't have a clue how to handle it. So at what point do you go, it's important enough an issue for me that people seek your help as a therapist. And to me, is that really another important piece of the puzzle? Is they need to have a trusted expert, a trusted person who can give them that empathy as well as their parents, because parents are great, right? But they're parents. We have no choice. We can't always be the nice guy we're not the friend and we're not the mentor. So how do you see that as a part of the puzzle?
Well, for me, I have a program called the Empowerment Space, and part of my 10-week program is that I go into the schools and I actually meet with the vice principals, the principals, the deans, the teachers, and we talk about what kind of bullying we're all seeing. And if we're not seeing it, we talk about what we are seeing if they're not seeing it. And we work collaboratively together over 3 meetings over a 10-week period of time to really address the problem. So if the education is needed, I can come in and collaboratively do that. I do that a lot where I go in and I'm very collaborative with the school administrators, and I let them know that from the beginning, but I give them another side to look at of how their child or the child might be viewing the lack of potentially help they're feeling at school and how we might all work together. So that's one way that I go in and do that as a collaborator with the school in 3 school meetings. And I think for teachers and schools, I think it's important that they have a good prevention program in the school, that the whole community, it has to start at the top down. So whether it's the, superintendent of the whole community, and it's the principals, it's the teachers, it's the parents, everyone is educated on a very similar kind of program together. And so they all can learn and be open to that process. And I think we always can learn from everybody else, and we learn from kids. I learn every day from my clients. They teach me something new, whether it's about myself or my work. I always learn, and I'm open to that process. Even as an expert and someone who's been doing this work for over 20 years, I still learn all the time. And I think it's important that if we don't have the right tools to help our kids in our schools, that we get people in there who really can help. But it has to be a community-wide type of help, not just one school doing one thing and another school doing another. I'm a big proponent of one day, Alan, maybe not right now, but I'm one day of let's pilot a great program within either the community, like mine is a community program, or a school program, and let's see how it is. Like, let's pilot it and see if it works over, states, counties.
Oh yeah.
let's see if it really works.
Yeah, I
And
mean, I totally agree with you. This is where, like, when I read your book, I'm like, oh, your empowerment program is so good, and we still have so many other places to go because you even mentioned it, like the superintendent. And I think the biggest problem we have, whether it's in the business world and school, make no mistake, to me, school is a business. You
Mhm.
know, uh, even though I don't think they view their parents and kids as clients like they should. But school is a business, and at the top of any business is numbers, whether it's
Yeah.
money numbers or other things. And this is where I worry.
Mhm.
At the higher levels, they're going to ask a school, a principal, let's say, how many bullying incidents happened at your school, right? So they're going to keep these statistics, no doubt about it.
Mhm.
And they report them, and let's say the school has a big problem. Instead of that being a positive, the superintendent's like, well, what are you? You're the principal. How come you're not solving this? That's what I'm convinced we got to
Yep.
solve. Is
You're
that's what
right.
I think is happening? Is
The
that they're
blame game.
using the well, instead of seeing bullying as a systemic problem
Mhm.
that a principal can't fix. Nobody can fix it. It's a community fix, right?
That's right.
It's
That's
we need
right.
better programs for that school. That school needs more attention.
Mhm.
Instead they're punishing the so what's that going to do? The school is going to not report. They're going to change cut their reports. I have a true story with my son where these kids were texting this one girl horrible stuff, and so of course she could take snapshots and had evidence. And the mother came to see me, as the bullying expert, and said, "What do I do?" I said, "Well, you have evidence. Go to the school with the evidence. It's got all the kids' names on it. It's Twitter. And my son had sent one tweet back defending the girl and calling all of these other guys who were his best friends at one point um, a name, something bad. And the school handled it this way. They brought them all in, including my son, and they said to my son, they said, "Well, if we're punishing them, then you were part of it by participating on Twitter, so we have to punish you. We have to, give you all 3-day suspensions unless you just guys want to forget it." True story.
Wow.
You know,
Wow.
and that's what I know is going on, is that they're trying to say, okay, now we don't have to mark that as a bullying incident,
Mm.
because and that's the thing I worry the most about, is those kind of things. I hate to tell you this, we got to take a break, but when we come
Okay.
back, I think I want to move the conversation up to middle school, where it gets really hard. Obviously, when kids are starting to change to teens, and now we start talking about some more serious issues around bullying. So if you'll stay with me, Danielle, we'll be
Yes.
right back with more Healthy You. Hi, and welcome back. This is your host, Alan Eisenberg, and I'm here with Danielle Matthew. She's a licensed marriage and family therapist and just finished writing a book that got published called The Empowered Child: How to Help Your Child Cope, Communicate, and Conquer Bullying, which was just released October 2017. Let's go up a little in age. I think we kind of hit on some of the younger child stuff, but I think it gets a lot more complicated. I know for me, and I know for a lot of
Mm.
the people I work with, Middle school is when a lot of things start getting damaged, is where I would say where we as people are developing sort of our future being, who we're going to be. And when bullying is interfering in that, what are those unique challenges, and how do we deal with the middle school years and overcome them?
Well, there's two parts to it. There's the middle school years with adolescent girls and adolescent boys, and with girls and boys, you're seeing less physical bullying, and it's more cyber and social or relational bullying, where people are leaving other kids out. As particularly girls, I see this in where they're gossiping, spreading rumors, leaving other kids out, pretending to be their friends, and don't want to talk to them anymore. Was their best friend one day, now isn't, posting mean things on social media sites, that they can't find, or taking screenshots and sending it to other people of private messages. And, it's really about social media in middle school and older, and
Mm-hmm.
how they really relate to each other at that time in their lives. And it's tough because there's a lot of social bullying going on amongst kids, and cyberbullying, where making mean statements and on social media sites. And so you really have to work with, what I just talked to a group of young adult middle schoolers actually this past weekend, and what I told them is every time that you write an answer or a text message back to someone else, think that you're on stage and everyone's always watching you, because I think you have to begin to look at how you use social media differently. And so parents have to have rules around, getting codes and getting phone numbers and stuff to get into the social media sites that the kids are using. And, if they are paying for the electronics, there should be a contract
Mm-hmm.
initially where the kids know that the parents are going to periodically be looking at all their sites and their social media, maybe their YouTube or other, social media sites. And so that they have that knowing ahead of time, and they can monitor what's going on. And it's really important to teach them how to use social media appropriately. And so that's why when I was talking to this group of middle school girls, I said, think that you're always on stage when you're on social media, because everyone could always be watching you. And it's not
Yeah.
to create a paranoia. That's not my attempt. But I want them to become aware of how their actions could affect them down the road. And so being careful what we write, what we say, how we look, how we present ourselves is always really important when it comes to social media. And if someone is getting bullied on social media, it's really important about how the victim responds back on social media, and what they say and what they do. If they know this person goes to their school, they can take a screenshot of, whatever the message is, and they can bring that into the school if that becomes more of an issue. But it really is hard in the sense that, parents want an answer and want it to stop. But once we put things out into the abyss of social media and, computers and websites and stuff, we can't get it all back. It just can't. We just
Yeah.
can't. And that's the hard part, because then we regret sometimes what we say and do, which is why we have to be thoughtful when we approach social media and, bullying as a whole.
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up. The other week, I got to talk to 12 to 17-year-olds.
Mm-hmm.
That's a difficult age. Luckily I got to talk to the older kids first because I wanted to talk about some serious stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that I kind of played by telling stories, but then I started talking to them about social media, and I said, do you know what cash is? And they're like, yeah, it's money. I said, no, cash is how on Google, if you go to Google, there's a little drop down, and if you publish something and then unpublished it, it stays in its cache. And I
Mm-hmm.
can go look at your old page, and I can go look at your old comments, and it never goes away.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, what? I said, so here, let me show you. If you go to Google, you'll see there's a little down arrow, and if you go to it, it'll say cache, CACHE, and it'll show you what the site was before in
Mm-hmm.
all the old versions, and people don't know it. They're like, "What?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's never gone, guys. It's never gone."
That's
And I
right.
said, and if you do Twitter and you're tweeting, here's how everybody know how to take a picture of your phone display. Yeah, I said, well, that's called evidence.
Yeah.
So, my story is always, if you're not willing to say it to your mother, don't say it on social
That's
media,
right. That's
you know.
exactly right. That's a
And
good
that's
way to put it. That's a
and
good way to put
and
it.
I tell them, HR divisions these days will ask for your
Oh
social
yeah.
media
Oh
account,
yes.
and they
Yeah.
are looking at it, and they don't care if you were 13 when you did something mean,
Oh yeah.
because to them that represents who you are as a person.
Yeah. That's right.
So I think you're right. It's something that is unique to, you and I wrote a story once, and it was called cyberbullying in my day, the phone.
Yeah.
Somebody would call and breathe heavy on
Yeah.
the phone and hang up, right? that
Right.
was
Right. Right. Right.
that
Right.
was
Right.
our cyberbullying. That's what happened to me. But then the phone started to be able to detect who the number was, and that stopped. But we know with the Megan Meyer story, and I'm not going to
Yeah.
tell it here. People can look it up. That
I know.
you can pretend to be anyone else and do terrible things to people, and it happens all the time, all the
Mm-hmm.
time. And then there's the ignoring that also happens. Sometimes
Yes.
they're not talking. Like you're writing stuff to people and they don't reply. How
Yeah.
does that feel?
Yeah.
So the problem is really systemic, because people don't communicate. Like you and I are having this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine texting it.
Yeah.
Imagine trying to read the emotions that you and I are talking about through text. And that's what these kids are doing in many cases. They want to text everything, and they're not understanding the power of the conversation, and how you have to really, in order to understand what someone is feeling, you're going to have to hear it. It's rarely going to come through in a text,
Yes.
and you could misinterpret it anyway.
That's right.
So I
That's
just
right.
dealt with someone like that, and I said, no, what they wrote, even though they didn't say I want to kill myself, they said something like, this will probably be the last time I get to talk to you. I said, you have to take that seriously.
Yeah.
I said,
Yeah.
and this as a therapist, and I know it
Mm-hmm.
as a coach, and I follow HIPAA. There's only one time that you can say, our HIPAA oath is off the books, and that's if you're going to harm yourself or others.
That's right.
And at that point, it's under obligation to do something about it
Yeah.
as a professional in the world of trying to help people.
That's
So,
right. That's
you
right.
know, that's
Absolutely.
what they have to understand is, and I always like it. I'm like, they're crying for help. They haven't done anything. That's a good
Mm-hmm.
sign,
Yeah.
but don't ignore it.
That's right. That's right. You don't want to ignore it now when they are asking for the help. You want to be
Yeah.
there and you want to be able to help them.
So as parents, I agree. Parents really need to be involved. They really do need to. If you are paying for them to have that phone, and
Mm-hmm.
even if they're not 18,
That's right.
you should be looking at everything. You
Yeah.
should be watching everything, because some of the stuff you got to ignore. I mean, I know kids, when they get to be teens, start cussing a lot and all that, and you can't call them out on the carpet on everything. You have to pick your fights carefully, because they'll start avoiding you in their magic ways that they do.
Yes.
So you have to be careful, and just a lot of times just read it and look for things, and not always, in my opinion, not always just think I got to confront them about everything I'm looking at, or let them know I'm looking every day.
Right. Or you have
Don't.
to, right. And you have to look, you have to ask in a way that's not intrusive or invasive to them.
Yeah.
Especially if you're wanting to know you're not seeing kids over anymore, you would ask more like, "Hey, I'm not seeing, Sally over here anymore. Are you guys still hanging out as much?" And I think it's just being very casual
Mm-hmm.
and strategic in what you say, and careful at the same time. So you're right, because you don't want to hit them in the wrong way where you're not going to then figure out what's going on.
Yeah, and I think it's, I love your opinion on this, but that it's fairly normal as children turn to teens, that they start to share a little less with their parents. That they're growing up, and so a lot of them tend to see, like, telling their parents a lot of stuff as, more childlike, and so that they entrust others, like they look for mentors. So it's important. I think it's important to, if you're a teacher, or you're at the school, or if you're a parent. Like, I know, for me, my best friend's parents were my confidants. I
Mm,
could talk to them, and that that's available, you should know who your kids are hanging around anyway,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
where there are trusted adults. Do
Yes.
they have a trusted adult? Because honestly, that's the person they're probably going to open up to, is that mentor. I was very lucky. I was in theater, and I had this amazing, teacher who was more than a teacher, more than a teacher could ever be.
Mm-hmm.
And I say, I have this cup at my desk. It's at my desk right now at work, and
Yes.
this is 40 something years later, right? And it says on it, I directed a co-directed with her, and it just says my name, and it says my right hand.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think when she gave it to me, she had any idea what that meant, to
Yeah.
have her tell me I'm her right hand.
Mm.
But that mug sits at my desk at work every day, and I look at it and
Aw.
remember that, and it's important.
I believe mentors are important to have. I have one, and I dedicated my book to her. Actually,
Mm.
she really got me going in this area and believed in my mission and got me teaching and getting the word out to people and believed in me and my passion for helping victims of bullying. And it was wonderful to be able to present the book to her about a month ago or so, and let her see her reaction to that. And she was so appreciative, and it was just such a wonderful moment with a mentor and someone who's so inspiring to you to be able to say thank you. And that was my
Yeah,
way of saying thank you.
yeah. I've been lucky because so in seventh grade was the end years that of bullying for me,
Mm.
because we moved after that away from this area that was very destructive for me. And I had this teacher that year, Mr. Cushman, and I got the luxury. Of course, he went on to become a principal, which is just great. I was like, oh wow, and I got to
Mm.
call him one day and tell him,
Aw.
you basically saved my life. You basically saved me in seventh grade, because
Mm.
he did this one thing. Well, he did a couple things, but he took a bunch of us under his wings, and I think he could see, he was very young, like in his 20s, and very hip. It's the 70s. He looked cool. But he was getting married, and he's like, you're all invited to my wedding. Now, we weren't invited to the party, but he invited us to his wedding, and we went. And I thought, I felt like I was mature, right? I felt like special.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think he thought twice about it. And that's the thing about mentors, is mentors are mentors because they're naturally mentors. And
Yeah.
I think that's an important thing to understand is, you can want to be a mentor and you can work to be a mentor, but you you can be naturally gravitated to because you're empathetic. You have empathy, and you have care, and you have love, and you have these a confidence in yourself, and that's what makes a mentor, really, to me. And that's the kids will naturally find that.
Yeah.
You know,
I
and,
Yeah, I hope every kid gets that opportunity like
yeah,
you and I have, because it really is a powerful thing. And it's wonderful to have that connection to someone who really believes in you. And it's great. Yeah,
and I think if anyone's listening, whether it's a youth or a parent, there are mentors all over the place. Whether it's the Boys Club of
that's
America,
right.
or other things, activities that you can get your child into, but they're out there waiting for you. And it might be a therapist. A therapist can be a mentor. A coach can be a mentor, like me.
Hmm.
But we're waiting. Like I said, and I'm waiting. Come talk to me. I'm here. I'm running bullying recovery.
Right.
Come
Right.
talk to me. I love talking to youth in particular, and telling them my story and saying, you guys aren't, no one's alone. No one's alone.
Yeah.
And don't feel alone. And I'm here, you know. And I know what you, well, actually I don't say I know what you feel. I understand. So
That's
tell me
right.
more about the empowerment space bullying support program you've put together, because I think that's really, so you've written this book, and I think it's around that, but what, so you had this mentor and she helped you get this started, and what are you doing?
So a couple of years ago, I worked for a company that for mental health. insurance agency, and I started to see across our country that we didn't have enough in place for prevention and community-based services that weren't in the schools. And I would be getting calls all the time about kids who were hospitalized because the trigger when we asked for the clinical assessment information was due to the fact that they were bullied, and parents were not always finding out until they were in the hospital. And I said to myself, we can't let this continue. What can I do about this? What can I do as one person? And so I hired an independent consulting company, and they did what's called a needs assessment of our community. And they talked to parents, educators, principals, kids, other professionals in the area, and surveyed different people, and really got a sense of what we have in our community to offer when we are at a crisis point with our kids who are being bullied and aren't hopefully at the point where they need a hospital at that point. What do we do? And they came back to me and said, the good news is that you don't have a lot of competition, but the bad news is you don't have competition. So if you want to write a program and pilot it, we can go from there. And so that's how I came up with the empowerment space. I took a year to write the program with a developmental psychologist and another therapist. And we came up with the empowerment space, and we really wanted to find tools and skills to empower kids to handle problems themselves and feel better about themselves for it, and really having parents help them along the way. And I also work, as I said earlier, with the schools. We have 3 meetings, and we also have 3 meetings with the parents. And we really check in and do surveys to see if the techniques and skills we're teaching through each session are really sustainable and helping to end some of the bullying or decrease it and increase the self-esteem and decrease some of the depressive symptoms that have come up, because they're obviously at a crisis. If they're between 10 and 17, my program could be very beneficial. And I do go to other places and I can teach it, and I have my curriculum, and I certainly am open to bringing it to schools or I think more so community-based clinics or places to really teach it, so we can all as a community have more resources and help to end bullying and help kids feel better about themselves.
Now, what I love about it is you're hitting what are a lot of current triggers that I don't know that we always are paying attention. That the kids today are under more stress. They're under there's a higher level of mental health issues than there ever were before for young people, and there isn't a lot of that solutioning going on. That idea that they need help. They need something to understand that that bullying is the cause. And I'm on one side. On one side I smile. It's like finally people realize what I was saying. Oh gosh, 35 years ago. Like I'm this way now at 13 because I was bullied. This is what happened. I've got these effects. I've got anxiety. I have stress. I have low self-esteem. I have, all these things that were haunting me. And I'm like, I can't let go of them. And, people are like, why can't you let go of them? I'm like, I don't know. Well, now we know it's called CPTSD. We know we have PTSD. And that it's not that easy to get over. It's like any trauma, you've got to.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's what people didn't understand. It's not kids being kids. It's not just, this happened to you. A traumatic event happened to you at a critical time in your developmental life.
Yes.
And that's what we have to address, is that it's a point in your developmental life where you are unable and do not have the coping mechanisms to understand how to stop or deal with it. And I'm so happy you're doing a program like this, because obviously you did the study and you've figured out, these are the things that can work, and we can be helpful, and in my opinion, we have to do it early. If you wait, it's unfortunate I went through it in my 40s, but you know what? At least I went through it and I got out the other side. Yeah, but it's unfortunate there was nothing in place, and that there was nobody who realized this was a real problem until that late in my life. And how many people, before me didn't get anything.
That's right. That's right.
And that's why I do what I do. That's why you do what you do. And I applaud you for taking the year out to really get serious about that program and know that what the goal is to help youth overcome these issues.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah, and make them feel better about themselves.
right.
And that's why, I wanted to get the word out even more, which is why I wrote The Empowered Child, because it's one of the weeks in my program where we talk about the 3 E's. I wrote a whole book around it because I want to help families feel like it's not the elephant in the room. We can talk about bullying. It's not something we can't talk about, and how they can talk about it, and hopefully giving them some clear guidelines and roadmaps. And I have sample dialogues in there as
Mm-hmm.
well to really help, and some things they can ask the school so they don't feel like they're alone in their journey.
That's what I really liked in your book is where you had those sample dialogues and sample conversations. Just one more time, I know because I feel like we hit on empathy a lot. Can you go through the 3 E's
I sure
each one more
can.
time?
Sure. So it's empathy and empowerment and engagement. And empathy is letting your child know that you want to know how they're feeling by asking open-ended questions. Like, I'm wondering if you're feeling upset right now. Not telling them how to feel, but asking if this is how they're feeling, so they can come back to you with a response about and have some control over their feelings. And then once you have established how they're feeling and how the bullying has impacted them, then you want to go into the empowerment stage of how do you want to handle the problem? What do you want to do? I believe in you as the parent. I know we can make this work. Do you want to role play some of the situations? How can I help you feel better about things? And once we have that plan, we implement it with engagement. And that's the follow through of the plan, and making sure consistently we're checking in. Is this working? Do we need to fine tune it? Do you want to practice some things a little more? We really help and support them in their journey as they're going through this.
Yeah. It's good stuff. Good stuff.
Thank you.
And succinct. That's another thing that people have to understand. Learning today is a 5-minute process, not an hour in a classroom process.
Yes, right.
That's actually my job. The thing I get paid to do is online learning development.
Ah.
So I tell people all the time, like, 5 minutes, that's what you got. Everything has to be broken into 5-minute chunks, and
Yeah.
that's all someone can tolerate, in learning. And then you have to do an exercise or play a game or whatever.
That's
It's
right.
like that's where we're at today.
That's
And
right.
you make it so easy. So thank you. And I really did enjoy the book.
Thank you.
I don't read many books in 1 or 2 sittings. Yours was, first of all, very straightforward. I don't want to call it easy read, but easy read in terms of, I don't think you were, talking above my or anyone else's intelligence level, which is people don't understand. I love to read about this stuff, but sometimes people talk at a very high level.
That's right. That's right.
And it's like your book is very accessible, and that's great. And also, it offers solutions and conversations. And so, again, thanks for writing it and sharing it with me.
Thank
So
you.
I have one last question to ask you, and then I'd love for you to tell people how they can get the book and get in touch with you, learn more. So this is a question I ask all my guests. What is the one thing you're doing today to live a happier and healthier life that you weren't doing before?
I'm following my passion of helping families stop bullying, and the more that I can do that, that's fulfilling for me. That's a love of mine and connection of people. And whether it's my own personal friendships and my marriage, always staying connected to what I'm passionate about and what matters to me, and following my authentic self. And that's what's important to me and how I do that.
Yep. I can certainly understand all that. And, following a passion, I don't think people realize, how important that becomes until, a certain point in life you go, you know what, I'm not going to be a millionaire or a billionaire, but you know what, I'm going to be happy. And I'm going to do what I want to do. And that becomes much more important. Or I'm going to be a good family member, and I'm going to be a good person to my significant other, and all these other things. Because as I always like to tell people, I say, you can have all the money in the world, and if you have no friends,
That's
when
right.
you die, how many people do you want at your funeral? think
That's
about
right.
that.
That's absolutely right. No, I agree.
And
Absolutely.
so thanks for being on the show. How can people get your book, get in touch with you, learn more about what you're up to with the Empowerment Space Bullying
Sure.
Program?
They can go to my website, which is www.empowerment.space. And on there is a link to my book, which can also be found on Amazon.com. If they'd like to email me or have a question or interested in the program or more about the book, I'm at dmatthew@empowerment.space.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, Daniel Matthew, it's been such a pleasure to have you on the show. I think, I love conversing. I think I told you earlier, and I tell my audience this all the time. This is my therapy, so I don't go to therapy anymore. Sorry, I know you're a therapist.
That's okay.
But I love talking to people in particular who get it.
Yeah.
And I felt like boy, when I read your book, I'm like, I'm so excited to talk to her.
Thank you.
I know you get the story and you get the child.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, that's really the key, is if we can help people when they're in their youth overcome bullying, they're going to become much better citizens of our world.
Yes.
And not that I'm a bad citizen. It just took me a while.
Of course.
But I also think it saves lives, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so thank you for being on Healthy You.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I loved having you, and I loved our conversation, and maybe we can do it again sometime.
Yes, that would be good.
Publish another book soon.
Okay.
So this is Alan Eisenberg, your host with Healthy You. Please join us next time.
Thank you for listening to Healthy University, brought to you by Bullying Recovery, LLC. This podcast does not replace the need for medical advice, professional diagnosis, opinion, treatment, or services to you or any other individual. The information provided here or through linkages to other sites is not a substitute for medical or professional care, and you should not use the information in place of a visit, call, consultation, or the advice of your physician or other healthcare provider. Join us next time for more Healthy University.